everyone, it's Dave with Android Police, and we're here in Barcelona, MWC, and this is the Sony Xperia Z2, the somewhat awaited follow-up to the Z1. As you can see already, it looks a lot like the Z1 did. In fact, you'd struggle to tell them apart if you were presented both of them, irrespective of size, because the Z2 is actually a little bit bigger. I believe it shrinks down the side bezels a little bit too. This has a 5.2-inch display, whereas the original Z1 had a 5-inch display. Has that same camera that Sony's been touting for a while now, that 20.7 megapixel sensor. It's an Exmor RS, I believe. And it takes pretty incredible photos in the right conditions. Sony's been pretty proud of that. Same G lens on there too. So that's definitely a big part of this phone. Of course, you've got the same water and dust proofing Sony promised on the Z1, on the Z2 too. But what's different? Well, for one, the Z2 is running Android 4.4 right out of the box, and Sony's software layers change up a little bit. You see you've got this stuff in the app drawer here, your most used apps, so you can display, your own order of apps or which apps you want to see. If you only want to see your most used apps, it's kind of neat. It's kind of stuff you would see in an overflow menu typically, but the way Sony set it up here, I think is a lot more intuitive for most people. I personally like it. The phone itself feels very quick. It's got a Snapdragon 801 processor in there, which is a brand new chip from Qualcomm. It's actually clocked at about 2.3 gigahertz, whereas the max clock is about 2.5. So it's still faster than the Z1, and the GPU is presumably clocked up too. This should also probably have the eMMC standard 5.0 storage in there, which is what the 801 chipset adds support for, and it's pretty important in terms of performance on a smartphone. So, as you can see, it goes through things pretty fast here. One thing that Sony's done that everybody's going to love is, I'm going to just demonstrate it real quick here with a nice bright screen. The intense whiting out effect that the screen used to have at an angle is vastly reduced. It's essentially gone. The screen just darkens at an angle. If you recall, most of Sony's phones to date, dating all the way back, I think, to some of the late Sony Ericsson models even, had this issue where the display would wash out very quickly at an angle, and the Z1 did have that problem as well, and it was a major gripe of a lot of reviewers and users. The Z2 does not have that problem. The viewing angles aren't perfect by any means, but much better than they were on the Z1. I think Sony really finally took those complaints to heart. We don't have availability info on Z1 for the United States yet. Some carriers in Europe, especially in Britain, have announced availability. You can expect to see it on Vodafone in a lot of countries, most likely. It's got 3 gigabytes of RAM. Internal storage, I believe, is going to depend on market or model. And I'm not sure on pricing at this point. We may have Euro pricing, but I don't know that off the top of my head, unfortunately. And as for release date, I believe it's fairly soon. So that is the Sony Xperia Z2, Sony's new flagship smartphone.